we should not let fear rob us of compassion and care for others. So I was in Italy. I was with the study abroad group from Faulkner University, and a group of 35 of us. So yeah, we went to Italy on January 21st. Over the course of that weekend, by March 2nd, I remember these dates because March 3rd was my birthday, and that was when we told the students we're going home. I was like, happy birthday, and we're going home. On March 2nd, we had plane tickets to return home, but because we were a group of 35, we weren't going to be able to leave until March 11th. Well, you know how fast this can spread. I knew that I was going to get home, okay? I knew God was going to get us home, but I was like, Lord, please let it be Friday the 13th, because I don't want to be, stranded here for who knows how long, because as you know, very rapidly, flights were being canceled. So we got our tickets. We got our tickets, I think, on that Tuesday, and I think it was overnight that night that Trump announced the travel ban. And we kind of, talked about, Boccaccio's Decameron, where, these young Italians, to escape the plague, they go off into this little villa outside of Florence and tell stories to pass the time. And so we're like, well, we're here, we're okay, everybody's safe. But we wanted to get home. And so we made it. Again, I was just really nervous until we were flying out of Florence. And then the Florence airport was closing that day. So we were one of the last flights out. And then we're sitting on the plane from Paris to Atlanta. I'm like, okay. And then they're like, oh, there's a little delay. There's something, there was a light on in the cockpit that they had to get, maintenance out. And I'm like, oh no, because we're going to get in just like a few hours before the deadline goes into effect. And so I'm like, again, a little anxious, but I'm just like praying. And then I'm like, okay, Lord, like we're going to get home. And maybe what you're doing is you're delaying us just long enough so that we'll get in at the same time as the second flight, so we can just all ride home together because they were going to have to ride separately. And sure enough, we all got into Atlanta about 20 minutes apart. And we were just, so thankful. And we got home late that night and went straight into quarantine. So that's kind of the story of our getting home. So we just finished our 2-week quarantine, and God has provided for all of our needs through church family and friends. And it wasn't even organized. It was just different people checking on us every day. And they would bring us our Walmart orders, or pick up food or toilet paper, goodie bags for the girls. We had been gone for 7 weeks. So, we didn't have anything in the fridge. And I say that the first 11 days were really enjoyable. By the 11th day, I was getting a little antsy, but again, it was great family time. It was a slower pace. It was probably one of the least stressful times, just like not having to be doing something. And being quarantined in our home was much better than being quarantined abroad, even though, again, we had safety, we had food, we had shelter, but you have 2 small children, you want to get them home in their own house. And so our house, which was very modest, felt like a mansion. So it's been really good. As I think about some of the reflections, or I reflect on it, think about some of the spiritual application, if I'm really honest, my initial reaction or thing that I think about is my own selfishness. Because, when this started to happen, especially the canceling of like the Israel trip, my first thought was, how's this going to impact my plans, right? We're going to go to Israel. We're going to take the girls to Disneyland Paris, because like they had done all sorts of things that they don't care about. And I'm like, that is for them. And we've been planning it for so long. And we're going to go on a Mediterranean cruise and go to these great like ancient Bible sites and go to Greece. And I was just like, how is this impacting me? Am I going to be able to do those things? And, we had been planning the trip for several years. And so, Israel was a highlight in my mind. I was looking forward to it for my own experience, to help make me a better teacher, for my girls to be there. And even if they didn't remember it, have pictures and be like, this is real, as they grow in their faith. And so my initial reaction was really, frustration of that possibility being taken away, which it was. I've changed my perspective a little bit now, but I think the first real thing that struck me was being reminded of how little we actually control. I'm a planner. I like to be in control. And yet here I was reminded of how much we just rely on God. And, sometimes when you have severe weather, the storms that happened just recently in Tennessee, or we lose our good health, when we're sick, we have this great appreciation for good health. And so it was just another instance, a weird instance, but one nevertheless where, that reminder of, hey, we rely on, I don't really control hardly anything. It's God. And it added a new layer to one of my favorite verses. So Proverbs 16:9, a man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. I've always liked that. I've always had that. In the old days on the big computer screens, you have something scrolling across slowly, and that was my verse. And even, for example, pursuing philosophy, then going into philosophy, it's a terrible job market, right? Why would you go to that job market? And I just always pray, I'm like, okay, Lord, if I just prepare myself, you take care of the rest. And God, you're above circumstance. And so, I always kind of prayed if I prepare myself, open or close whatever doors and just guide my path. And so this was another kind of case, right, where I had been looking forward to and preparing and planning to go on the study abroad, once in a lifetime kind of trip. And yet, my plans that seemed so sure were gone. And I didn't really know what was going to happen or when I was going to get home. But I think probably one of the sources of comfort to me is Romans 8:28. For we know that all things work together for good to those that love the Lord. And to know, I know that whatever happens, that God can work it out for good. My wife had commented as we were thinking about it, thinking back on the trip, it was like God always kept us one step ahead, of the real turmoil. I don't want to have a story that's like, oh, I had this terrible experience, because again, I felt we were very, very fortunate. And so there's tremendous suffering. We have not suffered. But, we were able to travel all over Italy before all this, took place. We were actually in Venice on Valentine's Day. And that was about a week before the cases started coming out there, and it kind of became one of the lockdown regions. And so, when we came back from free travel, we all got back, and that's about the time that some of the places in the north had shut down. So, just again, totally in God's hands of how we got home and getting in just before the travel ban. So I think those are some of the things, as I reflect on just the reminder of how little I control, trusting in God and his control, and trusting that he can work it out for good. As I think about how the church can witness and respond well, how Christians can respond well in the midst of all this, just what comes to mind is that we're the body of Christ, right? We're the hands and the feet of Jesus. And this is a tremendous opportunity to be ambassadors of Christ and to demonstrate love and compassion. Galatians 6:10 is one that comes to mind, that if we have opportunity, let us do good, especially those a household of faith. So it's an opportunity to serve our Christian brothers and sisters and to serve those of the world. And we can care for our own and care for others and leave an impression on those who don't yet know Christ. And what has been interesting in all of this is that for me, my experience has been that I'm not serving. I'm the one being served in this. When I came home and having to be on quarantine and being dependent on others. And so I'm just incredibly humbled and grateful for, like I said, just people just checking on us randomly. I try not to get too emotional about it, but it's just, we were taken care of. And so now that we are done with quarantine, right, and I'm like, I'm okay. I hope that, I can serve, others in the days ahead. I think another way that we can respond as Christians is really being, God's concern, rooting it in God's concern for the vulnerable of society. The poor, the foreigner, the widow, the orphan. And in this moment, we see segments of the population in particular that are vulnerable to this virus. And so we can show concern by doing our part, like by saying, and stay at home and social distance as much as possible to not endanger those who are most at risk. Also, not only that, but I think as we respond to the crisis, we can be intentional of how we display our freedom and how we handle our fear. Okay, and let me explain what I mean by that. Let me start with fear. If we know that God is in control and he works all things together for good, then we don't need to live in fear, right? And so we can continue our Christian walk by trusting in God, even in the difficult times, even in pandemics. And so, for instance, let me contrast it with the opposite. Okay, like what we ought to do. Here's what I think we ought not to do, which was kind of interesting. Something that we experienced. So we found out that there was this article kind of circulating around our area on the internet, and my daughter's face was on the cover of it. It was a picture of her, some others in a gondola, and it had this headline about the coronavirus. And so, a long story short, we quickly emailed the publisher and had the picture removed since we hadn't given permission. But nevertheless, my attention was drawn to some of the comments that we were seeing on it. And some of them were heartless and nasty and like, no way, don't let them come back here. And, I'll leave out some of the expletives. But again, it was weird to be like wrapped up in the narrative of the virus and to see the harsh reactions to us because of their own fear. And that leading to a lack of compassion for us or any of those impacted by the virus. And so I think we ought to have the opposite reaction to that. We should not let fear rob us of compassion and care for others. As I think about the part about freedom, I said about how we express our freedom. It seems to me that in our country, one of the things that, at least for me, I see is that freedom is thought of in primarily individualistic terms, right? Self-autonomy and unlimited. I should have the freedom to do what I want, to express myself, to be as happy as I want to be. And so we pursue our own happiness with as little limitation as possible. And I think this could spill over into how we respond during the time of the crisis with the virus. And that this individualistic and kind of unlimited view of freedom results in this mentality of, I'm concerned only for myself. No one should tell me what to do. I'm going to do what I want to do. But I think the better view of freedom is one that it's lived out in the context of personal responsibility and virtue. It's a virtuous freedom. It's not about pursuing only my own happiness, but trying to live virtuously, responsibly, out of concern for others rather than just myself. And, as Christians, if we wonder what virtue looks like, I think God has revealed that through, Jesus Christ as our model. So, for example, we self-quarantined as soon as we came home, out of respect for everyone else. And we did not think we were sick. We did not think that we were a threat to the health of anyone. And really, there was nothing forced upon us. I mean, the official recommendations are to do that, but nobody was checking on us. And so, I could have gone out the very next day. But the recommendations are there, and we could have freely moved about if we so desired. But again, that would have been an abuse of our freedom. And instead, this is an opportunity to live responsibly, virtuously, out of concern for others. So although, as we think about the coming days of our own actions and what we do, we may be limiting ourselves, in different ways in the coming days. And we don't know how long, but we can see this as an opportunity to submit to one another and to make decisions that are wise and broader than just ourselves. And so I think that's one way to not live in fear, to have that compassion and concern, and to think about how we live out our freedom.